Evening, everybody. This is DrHack, and we're going to continue on with our Sicilian today with white. But before I do that, let me wish you all a happy holidays, and I hope wherever you are, you're spending it in a high-backed chair, with a fire and a big old chessboard and a dog. But in case you can't do that, I hope it's family and friends. You do you. All right, so let's do this thing. I think the first thing we need to do with this one is we need to take a peek into the stats of it real quick. And so let's look over at the database. And this is the amateur database rated 2000 and below. We're using the Blitz database, although I'm going to add Rapid into it. So just the amateurists of amateurs in the database here. And we see that 43% of them are playing this knight to c6 move, which is what we covered in the first video briefly. I'm going to have to come back and do that one more justice. We need more video on that. But then we skipped to the second video down here to this one that we knew how to refute. We found that we could beat it just by playing a few cool moves in the beginning and out-tacticking them. Okay, so that brings us back to these two in the middle. And, together, if you add those little percentages together, they're the same as this one. And so if we think about these as being very similar openings, though they're not the same, they have a little different flavor, then we can actually cover the majority of this opening today. Right now. Let's do that, huh? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this DrHack style, and we're going to take the pieces off the board and flip it upside down right now. All right, so we've got the pieces off the board, and we've got it flipped upside down, so we want to know from Black's point of view what he's up to first, and then we can figure out what we should do. So let's play this first pawn up for Black, and let's waste a turn with White, because we don't know what we're going to do with our pawns yet. And let's play the second pawn into the middle for Black. Now, do you notice how that covers the 4 squares on the 5th rank across the middle of the board? What if you were to give Black one more pawn move? The most common pawn move is actually this one, because they're stopping your bishop from coming in and giving check, and they're stopping your knight from jumping in and harassing a queen that might sit here. And they really want that pawn there, right? But now they're covering 5 squares through the center of the board on the 5th row. How in the world do you get through the 5th row if that's covered by pawns? And the answer is you got to use your own pawns, because big pieces can't do that, right? Small pieces chase big pieces, so big pieces can't go through there. And so we have to play one of our own pawns into the center to break up the other pawns that are there already. Let's go back to here now. So we play one move for Black, and what if we use this F pawn to help us get a second pawn into the middle? Now, if your name is, Ben Feingold, look away. I mean, it's too late. Actually, you guys need to go over to his video, and you need to, type into the comments. DrHack says move back to Michigan, because we are starting a chess club up here, and we need him to, we don't have any grandmasters. He lives somewhere warmer now. He'll never do it, but still, you should tell him. Tell him to do it. Okay, so. Here we are, and we're attacking 5 squares across the middle for Black, right, or 4. And now White has to figure out how he's going to get through. And he has really now that we've got these 2 pawns set up in the middle, he's got 2 options exactly. We can play the F pawn forward, which does some things. Can you see what it does? If this pawn were to move, that clears out exactly this square in the middle. One of those 5 things. So if it captures or if it pushes past, this square is now no longer attackable by a pawn, and now a knight or some other piece can hop into that square and use it. Aha, your knights are getting through the 5th row. So this F pawn move doesn't really attack the king side, even though it looks like it is, because it's on the king side. What it does is it attacks the center, and like weirdness that chess is, when you play the pawn into the middle, it doesn't attack the middle, it attacks the king side. You go, what? Yeah, well, first of all, if this pawn were to move or anything, right, this square would become weaker, and we can maybe take that pawn. That's one thing that it does, but actually it's attacking this way too. And there's usually a knight sitting there, and that knight's usually guarding h7. And you also opened a diagonal to h7 by doing that. So you removed the defender of h7, and you opened a way to attack h7. And your knight can come in, and your queen can come in, and your bishop can come in, right? And you get an attack on the king side of the board by pushing the e pawn. Isn't that bizarre? How the pawn that's in the king side attacks the center and the pawn that's in the center attacks the king side? It's true. Let's put the pieces back on. Let's look at this with everything. Okay, so we're going to take these one at a time, right? And then we're going to start with this d6 move. And remember, our move was to play f4. And you already see there's something going on with it because the numbers here are bumped, you know, for the amateurs. We're winning more when we play f4. And that's because in the Sicilian only, we're not talking about these e4, e5 openings where the queen's going to come out and cause chaos, right? That's very different stuff. So don't get these mixed up. This is a Sicilian. We are able to now push these pawns through the middle when we need to. Well, great. Okay, so let's play a few more moves into this because I want you guys to see exactly this moment. And I want you to look deep into that database, right? And you notice that the guys that are trading off their bishop before they play d3 are doing better than the guys that are not. Let's see why that is, right? Well, first of all, we know exactly what to do if they put the knight on c6. We're going to capture it, and that's going to mess up the pawns. We talked about this in the first video. Look how good that's doing. Okay, but what if they decide to trade the bishop off? Let's go ahead and take it. And I'm going to give you a tiny bit more theory from Black's point of view because I want you to be able to recognize this mistake. Okay, it is actually a mistake for Black to take with the knight. And most people will take with the knight. Okay, you see that, right? And the reason why it's a mistake is because this knight from this track is much, much better. It's a stronger piece because when it gets to the middle or when it gets down to this place here, it's going to keep the queen defending c2. And if the queen is tied to defending c2 by a 3-point piece, right, that's really good for Black. And that means the queen's not going to be able to zip out this way to attack the king or come over here and up here to attack the king. She has to kind of stay back and look at c2. Even with the knight back here because of the possibility, like the threat of him doing it. So this track for the knight is much more powerful. Taking with the queen is much better, and yet all the amateurs take with the knight, which makes this knight virtually useless. And now white starts scoring much, much better. Okay, just to understand that. Okay, so trading off this knight, trading off this bishop is good because we want to, let's look at this again. We want to close in these pawns so that they fill in the gap that this piece left behind. So the pawns are now attacking white squares. The bishop was on a white square, but it's no longer there. That's why the pawns need to be on white squares. Okay, this time it has nothing to do with the pawn structure. This is good, healthy pawn structure for Black. It has everything to do with covering the place that you're leaving behind. Got it. Okay. Okay, so we get to this moment, and I have to ask the question. I'm just going to pose this question to the room, the empty internet room. Would we ever play d4? And I think the answer to that is no, but yes, only in one case, I think. And the reason why I say that is because if we're going to go and trade off this bishop, then you're going to be playing a game with 2 knights and 1 bishop, and he's going to be playing a game with 2 bishops. And if we think about that, his bishops want to be able to move through an empty open board and attack things. And our knights want to play in a closed up, clogged up board where they can have some forward square somewhere they can just sit on and be, right? So we're both playing very different styles of games at that point. Now, if they were to play a move like this, I think that changes everything because now our bishop will not trade off the board, and because that piece is going to stay on the board, now I believe d4 is the correct move because that opens the game in a way that our bishops can be more useful, right? We could then put the bishop on d3 behind the pawn and then attack this way and maybe play the move e5 and get that kingside attack rolling that we talked about. Okay. So I think the only time I would play this all the way through the middle and try to do this kingside attack is if they tried to stop you from trading the bishop in the first place. If they don't stop you and we get a chance to trade it off, then I would say never play d4. Always keep that pawn back on d3 because it needs to cover the holes your bishop leaves behind. I hope that was clear. I said that a bunch of times in different ways. So now let's go back to this other one. This e6 move. Right. And we're still going to play this f4 idea, but you're going to notice that the most popular way they can play it, right? They could go d6 and play into the hedgehog and just cover those 4 squares like we just talked about. They could play a6 and stop the bishop from getting there, in which case I think this d4 move would be a good idea, right? And the attack through the middle. But what if they play this move? And this is where it gets a little bit dangerous, because look at the amount of times that black is winning versus the amount of times that white is winning. It's almost tilting in black's favor, isn't it? And that's because as amateurs, we don't understand the importance of this pawn. This pawn is uber important to our position. If we let black take it, which I am guilty to having done before, and we don't replace it with another pawn, what is this guy doing? Nothing, right? By himself, he is not a good piece. And he's kind of out there, and he's making this bishop run into a pawn instead of being a good piece. Now the bishop can't even get out to attack the king side. So we have hamstrung ourselves by putting the 2 pawns out and then letting one of the pawns get traded away. What we have to do in this case is we have to back this pawn up. We have to relocate another pawn onto it. We can't let him take this pawn for nothing. It has to be replaced. And now this is hard, right, for amateurs, because we have to play a game queenless. But we still have the pawns in the center of the board. We still have control. And so when we go to the Masters database and look at all the moves we just played, we're going to find that this was actually the right way to do it. Okay, and we should have a better position, and we just need to learn how to play that position. And if we did anything else, right, going back to here, we were doing much, much worse. D3 was really the only way to keep equality and keep going with white. That's a hard one to find if you don't really understand. Okay, taking this now would be a big mistake for black. Good stuff. Okay, so going back here, so we need to make sure of that. If this pawn goes into the middle, don't let him take this one for free and replace it with a piece. We need to replace it with a pawn. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I think we can play some pretty solid chess games from those positions that we've talked about. I hope this helps somebody. Happy holidays. I'll see you in a week. Take care now.